Welcome to Shore Perspectives, a community feature of WESR Radio, highlighting the spirit of the shore from those who call it home.
Hello, my name is Lowell Wallace Sr. I'm the current camp commander of Camp 2189, Honorary Historical Society of Sons of Confederate Veterans.
We find ourselves in the state of Virginia, as well as across the country, is the attention turning to Confederate monuments. And it's nothing new. We've heard the rumblings about it for years, but it seems to have really become intensified over the past few weeks. Tell me your perspective on that situation and the importance of preserving these monuments.
Well, first of all, the Black Lives Matter movement started as a peaceful protest and was shanghaied by anarchists. Let's come to the point. All lives matter. It's not just Confederate monuments. It's Andrew Jackson. They even wanted to mess with Abe Lincoln's statue and did so in one or two cases, if I remember correctly. So it's not just things Confederate. It just has everything to do with the history of this country, whether you agree with certain parts of it or not, and the social fabric. It just seems that there is a very violent vocal group that is bent on tearing it down. And bless their hearts, they had a reason to demonstrate, because we need to weed out the rogue cops. I mean, every time you turn around, somebody's being shot. And it's not acceptable. Just prior to the war, Robert E. Lee's father-in-law died, Daniel Park Custis. And he was instructed as the executive of his estate, and he was busy plowing through the red tape to free all the slaves that belonged to that family. And it wasn't enough that he was in the process of doing that. In the process, he was criticized for not moving fast enough. But it was just the red tape. A lot of your Confederate leaders did not own slaves. A good many did. I might add that early in the war, Jefferson Davis, in a letter to his wife Rena, wrote, "Regardless of whether the South wins or loses this war, slavery's got to go." Now you have radicals on both sides of a question, but the poor people in the middle are the ones that usually catch the most guff. But that was the prevailing opinion, to the point that one of the earliest articles in the Confederate Constitution was a continued ban or an illegal ban on illegal slave importation. There were elements in the Confederate Congress, on the South you called them fire eaters. They wanted the floodgates open, they wanted to import slaves and just go at it tooth and toenail. But they were voted down by the moderate and liberal elements of the Confederate government. And being a true Confederacy and a constitutional republic, it was left up to the various states to do with it what according to what was best for them. But you can talk about, why this happened, that happened, but you will always go back to one source: money. The yeomanry would say the war between the states, and we call it the war between the states or the war for Southern independence. But it was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. So we can go in different directions on this, but we will always come back to money. The stomping on the amendment to the Constitution that gives you a right to your own opinion and to state that. And in the past, what made us different from other democracies is that no matter how vehemently you may disagree on either side of the aisle, what they will come together and defend shoulder to shoulder was your right to do that. And we have become so polarized now that is gone out the window. That is gone out the window. And if you know all the ins and outs about the last time that happened, it resulted in a war that cost this country between 700,000 and 1 million lives, some 2 to 3% of the total population. That's what scares me about this, because history Centuries can come and go, but the one constant is human nature. That's what makes God's word as relevant today as it always has been. Human nature. We don't change. The times might change, but our reactions and responses to the times don't change. It's human nature. And we're taking a very dark path. And I'm afraid for the country. I'm afraid for the country now. Oddly enough, the Confederacy went to war in defense of the Constitution. We looked at the Constitution much the same way as a fundamentalist Christian will look at 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. All scriptures God breathed. That Constitution was ratified. It meant what it said, and there was no way to mold it and manipulate it, to say what it really, take it out of context. So we actually were trying to defend the Constitution as written.
A lot of people will argue that the Sons of Confederate Veterans and other Confederate associated groups are promoting slavery, are promoting discrimination. What is your response to that?
We don't have many, but the Sons of Confederate Veterans have black members, simply because the Confederate Army was an integrated army. And that meant that you had black soldiers that became Confederate veterans after the war was over. Anybody that wants to belong to us and it can trace their lineage back to a Confederate veteran is welcome. We have one man, H.K. Edgerton. He's a man of color, but that man has been beaten on more than one occasion. He's been hospitalized because of his political views and his stance on this whole subject. No, we're not lily white. We have black members. You'll see these old pictures of veterans lining up for portrait at reunions. You'll see one or two blacks. They're not there as being politely invited to it. They were members of the regiment. And a woman, Teresa Roan, she is a woman of color. I've met the gal. She was hired as the archivist for the Museum of the Confederacy. And as such, she started going in the back and digging up all this documentation that had been sequestered and set aside on black participation in the Confederate war effort. And people would come in and see her and engage her in conversation. And she would be insulted, called a liar, and this, that, and the other thing. And ultimately, she was fired by the museum. And the United Daughters of the Confederacy picked her up as their archivist. And she wrote a book about that, based on what she could retain. And not only were they in the Army, a lot of times they were paid twice the salary of the regular private in the field because of the technical expertise they brought into the Army. But see, none of that gets told. And all we want in Sons of Confederate Veterans is to defend our families' good names. I mean, this isn't the moose or the elks over here. These are our families. And to tell the whole story, warts and all. Unwhitewashed, uncensored. Just get it all out there. And if that were to happen, I can't help but believe instead of pouring salt in a wound, it would be a balm towards healing. Learn the whole story, the facts. Then if you don't change your position, you're welcome. You're welcome to do that, and we will respect and defend your right to do that. But we have been maligned and lied about, and just the North has it all tied up in such a nice, neat little package. Okay? But it's far from that. Oh gosh, I wish that we could have local community roundtables of leaders in the community in which way we could sit down and talk about this in depth, because you and I are only going to really scratch the surface today.
A lot of people have mentioned a fear of erasing history. Do you think that we're erasing history by removing these statues and monuments?
What's the difference in doing that and burning books in the 30s? First you got to erase the slate, then you can paint the picture to suit yourself. That's what's going on. That's what scares me. Take a deep breath. Throw yourself in neutral. Sit down with an open mind and listen to what we have to say. We will do the same. I don't blame the black community for the way they feel based on what they have been told for generations. And after the war, it sure enough did get ugly, Kelley. It got ugly. The hate came after. It wasn't that way. I kind of experienced it on the twilight of it when I was little. You know, any person in relatively good health can be a mother and a father, but it takes a real commitment to be a mom and a dad. My mother was Mary Louise Gladden from Cherokee. My mom was Ethel May Ebron from Florida. The woman, I thought she had supernatural powers. She caught me at everything I ever tried to do, and she would jerk a knot in my chain in a heartbeat, but all through that, I knew that woman loved me. And I can talk about Mama all day long, but I can't dwell on that for long. They're getting emotional. Mama got jealous and sent my mom away. But all this is no reason, it's no wonder that we have hate now, anger and hate. So sit down, take a deep breath, put your hands in your lap, and let's talk. Let's reason together. Let's beat these spears into plowshares quickly before it's too late.
For Short Perspectives and WESR Radio, I'm Kelley Gaskell.